Okay. Yeah, that's plenty of time. All right, and we are live. Well, hello again to all the boys and girls out there in YouTube land watching. John and Ellie of Georgia Beer Reviews back at you this evening with kind of a spur of the moment thing. I had a long day at work. I missed out on Wild Card Wednesday on Louisiana Beer Reviews. You guys can go back and check that out if you didn't already see it. So Michael was kind enough to grace me with his presence for another spur of the moment examination. And tonight we are looking at lagers. Michael, I'll let you go first. What do you have this evening?
I have from Germany, and it's supposedly one of their better selling beers called Bitburger, and they're listing it as a premium pils, and it's an 11.2 ounce bottle at 5% ABV, and this is what it looks like in the glass. So very, very clear with nice upward bubbles coming up. So a lot of carbonation with a pretty thin, bubbly head. Half a finger, maybe.
Yeah.
Half a thumbnail. It's kind of small, but it's clear yellow toward the gold side, but pretty light.
Okay, and there's mine. Mine is more straw.
Yours has kind of a chill haze on it almost.
Yeah, it's a straw appearance with a slight haze to it, some nice bubbles going up the glass. Very little head as well on mine, about a half a finger's worth. Which, by the way, I guess I should tell the viewers out there what it is that I'm drinking. This is from Wild Leap Beer Company out of LaGrange, Georgia, one of my favorite craft breweries. This is Gratuity, and it's a light beer. It's 4.2% alcohol. I don't normally buy light beers, but I love Wild Leap, and the selling point for me was 10% of all of the sales of this beer go to the service industry, which I think is pretty cool. And the back of the label actually looks like a receipt, and it's signed Gratuity. So I thought that's pretty cool. It was $9.99 for the 6-pack, so not too expensive. Good pricing on it. And yeah, as I poured that last little bit, the haze actually increased. So it does have some haze to it, but as you can see, super light appearance. Let's see, go to the comments. Lone Star, cheers. Thanks for tuning in this spur of the moment beer review. Hope you're doing well, buddy. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, we'll get started with you, Michael. Tell us a little bit about the Bitburger.
Okay, so you can see it in the glass. Let me give it a nose. I don't know. You get the pretty typical kind of grainy kind of smell. Like, since this is made in Germany, I'm assuming it doesn't have any adjuncts in it. So I guess what I'm kind of getting is kind of like the malt maybe a little bit and the hops in the smell. Smells clean, though. I mean, I have to say, and it's not, when I say grainy, I guess what I kind of mean is whatever malt they're using in it, whether it's wheat malt. I'm not even sure what the components are in there, but there's kind of like a grainy,
right?
But it's
one thing we do know about Bitburger is it adheres to the Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law of 1516. So it only has hops, malt, yeast, and water. That's it.
So we know it can't have any corn adjuncts.
No adjuncts, like none of that stuff. That's one good thing about the German beers. You know exactly what you're getting. And really quick, before Craig says he's going to bed, he will listen to this on his ride to work tomorrow between 3 and 4 a.m. Good night to you, Craig. Sleep well, and hopefully we'll get your day started off on the right foot tomorrow. So got the nose. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about the flavor of that beer, Michael. Cheers.
Okay, the flavor is very clean. It's got when you take the first sip, it's a clean, very clean taste. It has a mild hoppy bitterness, if you know what I mean, in the Pilsner side of things. It's not an IPA bitterness, it's a hop bitterness, but it's refreshing and very drinkable. I guess I've always to some extent like German Pilsners as a style, and I find them more interesting than their American cousins, which I guess also includes the macros, I guess, in the same.
Right. Miller Lite, the greatest, the highest selling Pilsner in the world, right?
I'm not insulting those beers. They just don't seem to have the edge that the German beers have, and they're in similar APV categories. This is 5. What's Miller Lite? 4.6, something like that.
I think it's 4.2. I think it's the same as the one I'm drinking now. It's
4.2. So this is just a little bit higher, less than 1%, and it's still very sessionable, very drinkable. And this is a beer, summer type beer, which you could sit around and have 3 or 4 without having any trouble in terms of, I mean, maybe you don't want to drive around too much, but in terms of doing other activities.
Right. Well, and the difference too, the macro counterparts that we're talking about, they all have adjuncts. None of the German beers do, which people say a lot of people say there's really not much of a difference. The adjuncts aren't necessarily adding flavor. It's just filler. But if you drink a German beer like Bitburger, and then you switch over to, I don't know, Budweiser or any of the big light beer, macro light beers, there's a big difference in the taste. So there's something to be said about the way that the Germans brew the beer. And the fact that they don't have adjuncts, to me, they're far superior than the American beers that we get in that category.
I guess I find the German beers to be cleaner tasting. It seems like the adjunct lagers seem to be clunky to me. Now, again, I'm not a regular taster of those things. I go to a party and that's all they have. But there are times I've actually had wine instead of drinking an adjunct lager. So it just shows you that I can actually, not have beer that night and have red wine, which is my wife's drink. So I'll have red, and I like red wine. If it's really good, I can really get into it. It's interesting on today's show, and if you do watch the replay, some guy from Russia came on, Max Volk.
Oh, really?
And guess what he was drinking? What we would call Budweiser, but in Russia it's called Bud. It's just B-U-D. Because there's all that stuff with the Budvar from Czech Republic, whether it's Budvar or Czechvar, and Russia, which I guess was the former Soviet Union when the Czech Republic was part of their country. I guess that's why the other countries around the Czech Republic can't sell it as Budweiser. So it's called just Bud. Same can, but it's Bud instead of Budweiser.
Are the specs the same on it? Is it
5%? It's 5%. Is that what American Budweiser is too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, it was 5%. He wanted to give a review, but he was the 8th person in. So Jay brought him in just to introduce it, and he got tired in the basement. He kept coming up in the private chat saying, "I'm here." And I don't think Jay was ignoring him. He just wasn't ready to bring him up. I guess he got tired and he left. But it was late in Russia. Remember, it's 7 hours later than New York. So it was already in the morning. He watches Jay's early morning stuff when it's in the late morning in Russia, when Jay is in the early morning in New Orleans. So he was an interesting character, but I kept asking him his name, and he kept just, Bud in a Russian accent. So it's kind of funny. But he seemed like a friendly enough guy. I mean, he comes back and be nice to talk to him. We've never had anybody on from Russia before.
No, can't say that we have. Yeah. Interesting. Cheers to Alex, the beer master. We got Kyle. We got Flacco. Man, we got a lot of people in the chat. Cheers to everybody.
John, you can thank Alex for Sunday. He did a marvelous job hosting.
Yeah, I watched. I watched most of it live, and then I watched the rest of it when I got back home. So yes, Alex, I know you're listening. Good job, buddy. So and let's see. I guess I should talk about my beer a little bit, huh? So this could be an ale. I'm not 100% sure. It's a light beer. For purposes of this video, we're just going to say it's a light lager. Already talked about the appearance, the aroma. Very light. It's very clean smelling. You're getting a little bit of hop action on the nose, which is nice because you typically don't get that with your American macro light lagers. Almost a light citrus note on the nose. And then I'm getting like a wheat bready note. So maybe they use wheat malt. Doesn't really specify anything on the label other than it's a light beer and it's 4.2%. It smells really clean though, nice and malty with that citrus hop note. So I'm going to get in. Well, I've already gotten into it. I'm going to take another sip.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah. Very, very light, very crisp, clean, refreshing. It's got a nice dry finish on it. Of course, it's super light. You could pound these down all day, 4.2%. No alcohol presence whatsoever. It's got some nice sweet bready notes. It's got that lemon citrus thing that I'm picking up on. It's not really bitter, but there is a little bit of hop character on the finish from whatever hops they're using. It just leaves a nice little refreshing citrus note on the finish. And it is dry, which makes you want to go back in for another sip. These light lagers have really crisp, dry finishes, which makes them ultra drinkable. And that's exactly what this is, an ultra drinkable light beer. And it's much better than, Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, in my opinion, because it has a heck of a lot more flavor than Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light. And that's why I usually don't buy light beers, because they just don't have enough flavor. But this one, I'm very impressed with.
When you viewed last Thursday or the Thursday before when we had the thing, and my daughter did the light beer from Abita, and she gave it a 6 out of 10, which I guess on our rating scale wouldn't be a 60. See, it's interesting when you convert from the straight to the numerical, you can't do it straight, because a 6 would probably still be a C plus in my scale anyway. So maybe the 60 that she gave would probably transmit to like a 77 or a 78 kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, that's how I would.
Yeah, I kind of had to adjust my scale a little bit too, even though it's 0 to 10, which, 0 to 100, it's similar. But when you're, I guess because you have less numbers, you have to think about it a lot more, because
it's skewed almost, because you're not going to give any 10s. At least I'm not going to give any 10s. So 975 is about the best that I've ever given, which would be a 99. So when as you go down, the point difference you have is really limited because you have less numbers to use.
Right. Yeah, like I gave one of the beers I drank an 8.5, which converted to 0 to 100, it should be an 85, but realistically, it probably would have been like an A minus.
Right. So that could have been a 91 or a 92.
Right. But so the numbers didn't translate exactly. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. And I don't know if are you doing one tomorrow night, or
doing one a week from tomorrow? I sent
it on
Facebook, which maybe you don't look at, but I gave you a Facebook invitation to it.
Well, I do have Facebook, so maybe I could.
I'm sure you don't look at it all the time, but a week from tomorrow at 7:00, we're going to be doing. We found out that the beach club, you can start going to the beach if that's all you want to do. They're not opening the cabanas and the pool until phase 3, which I think right now is supposed to start the next week, which would be the 8th of July. But we'll see.
Hopefully you'll be, back in action at the beach club before too long, and it won't be too crazy. Sounds like you guys are finally New York. New York's still crazy compared to Georgia, because we're pretty much back to normal, but you guys are at least heading in the right direction now.
But you're fortunate, John, where you are. It just seems like there's a mild outbreak in Atlanta. Other than that, even though you've opened up, the COVID doesn't seem to have affected the rest of the state of Georgia that much, from what I've seen anyway. Florida's in trouble. So is Arizona and Texas right now, with a lot more cases. And the fortunate thing so far, the deaths aren't going up as fast as they did at the beginning here. We have, because of, I guess, the population being so dense, when we had our outbreak, it was very hard to control it because so many people were affected by it at the beginning. And so lately, ours is not only flat now, we're going the good way now, where it looks really good. We're in phase 2, which now you can eat outside restaurants now. You can't go in, but you can eat. You can go in to take out. You can't go into stay.
But you can sit there. You don't have to take it home or eat in your car. They have outdoor seating.
If they have sidewalk where they can put tables, you can sit outside. But you can probably imagine this, even though you've never been to New York, because it's so heavily populated, even the sidewalks are at a premium. So a restaurant can't set up more than 4 tables maybe in front of its restaurant, depending on the size, geographically, in order to do it. So it's not very profitable for a restaurant. Let's say a restaurant inside has 20 tables inside. If you only have 4 tables outside, you can't really make that much money. But the other side is that's better than no tables. So
better than nothing.
Closed for 3 months. So it's a positive thing, but we'll see when we can actually go inside.
Right.
Have you been?
Well, you got a rating for the Bitburger?
Yeah, I'm giving it a 91, which is an A-.
91. Okay.
What about?
I'm actually going to give this a 93. It's just getting into that solid A range. Obviously I would prefer just a regular lager, not necessarily a light lager, but it's got a ton of flavor for a light lager. It's got that nice little citrus note that you don't get with the macros, so you can tell it's craft made. It's really enjoyable. I could drink a ton of these, and I think that's obviously the idea with it. But like I said, it supports the service industry, which we were just talking about, so that's always good. I might even go buy another 6-pack if they got more at the store, just to help support local economy and small businesses around here.
Sounds good.
Let's see. Yeah, we got a lot of people in the chat tonight. Alex was talking to me earlier. He is so excited about Friday he's going with a buddy of his to another, I guess, another state for the day, because I'm not. I think he said.
Is it
How far
Pennsylvania?
is Vermont from New Jersey?
So he's going all the way up from Jersey to Vermont. That's about 10 hours.
No, maybe it wasn't Vermont. Maybe it was Virginia. I don't know. Anyway, he said he's making a trip with a friend of his, and he told him that there was a Hungry Howie's nearby, and he's always heard me talking about Hungry Howie's. I mean, it's just cheap pizza. But anyway, he told me he was very excited to get to try Hungry Howie's. So, Alex, don't get your hopes up too high, but I hope it lives up to your expectations. But it's just, like fast food pizza.
Pennsylvania is a state very close to him. He's very close to the Pennsylvania border. But
maybe he's going to Pennsylvania. I can't remember. Maybe it was Pennsylvania. That makes the most sense. Surely he's not going all the way up to Vermont.
It's a long trip. That's past Bumpy.
Yeah.
When you first came on, either Wild Card Wednesday, when you made your original, you were still living in Columbus, right? That's before you moved. When we first met.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
There are 2 Hungry Howie's in Pennsylvania, in Altoona and Erie, but that's not where he'd be going.
Right.
He's near eastern Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. So maybe he is going further down. Because the ones I see here are in Altoona and Erie. Erie is as far west as you can go. But I'm just looking on my phone. Original flavored crust pizza.
Yeah.
But we've talked about, you and I, about Columbus and Phoenix City across the river.
There you go. She's going to Delaware.
Yeah, Delaware and Pennsylvania are right next to each other too. My daughter went to college in Delaware.
Okay, that's right. You always you wear the Delaware hoodie a lot.
Right. So it's funny. She did her graduate work right near where the sports teams in Philadelphia play, the Eagles and the Flyers and the Phillies. So at a place called Widener University not in the, on that, whatever that railroad is. There's a railroad that goes by right into Philadelphia. And she went to school there while she was working. So I was very proud of her. She was working at Planned Parenthood in right off this campus where she went to college, 28 hours a week, which is pretty close to full time. It's not 40.
Right.
And she went to college full time, but it was interesting how she did it. She had one evening a week, and the other thing was on Saturday and Sunday. It was 8 hours each day. So that's a lot. If you think about it, a lot on your plate when you're in school both weekend days, and you have to drive 40 minutes from your house and back too, besides the 8 hours you're putting in, and going to work full time. And I think the way the 28 hours were, she was working 4 days too. So it wasn't like she was able to get the hours in 2 days or 3 days and then have all this time off. So we were really proud of her. Of course, it's funny how long ago this is, because she's been back in New York now, I think for 3 years, working now for the Department of Health. But she was working in Delaware for 5 years, and she went to school there for 4 years, getting her bachelor and her master's degree at Widener.
Okay.
But I was going to say before, when I was doing my traveling sales bit, which was before you were born, in the late 70s and early 80s, I found Phoenix City, which is right across the river from Columbus, to be almost something you could have taken out of the Civil War era. It was really, it was strange to me to go across the river. The difference between Phoenix City and Columbus, like you were going into a time machine. Couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. It was almost scary. But again, there's no reason to be scared because it was real. But it was, I don't know. What do you remember about Phoenix City?
So I used to drive over to Phoenix City quite a bit when I lived in Columbus, because it's only like a 15-minute drive. You just get on J.R. Allen Parkway, you go over the Chattahoochee River, and you're in Phoenix City, which Phoenix City, by the way, is the only city in Alabama that's on Eastern time zone. So that just gives you an idea of how close it is, because most people that live in Phoenix City drive into Columbus to work because there ain't nothing in Phoenix City. It's like there's a Piggly Wiggly and Ezel's Catfish House and a bunch of nothing. And it still is that way. There's really not a lot there. But it was big, back in the day too with the mob. I don't know if you heard all the old mob stories. The mafia was big in Phoenix City back in the day. And a lot of crime, a lot of murders, a lot of unsolved mysteries that occurred in Phoenix City. But yeah, Columbus is so big, and there's so much going on in Columbus. And then to be that close, I mean, literally a stone's throw away, you throw a rock across the river, and there you are in Phoenix City. It is night and day difference. It's crazy. It really is crazy.
But I found it interesting, and it was like different to me, because I didn't have Alabama wasn't in my territory, so I didn't have that. But it was like a respite from whatever I was doing, and I thought it was cool. And we are talking about, let's see, how many years ago? 20. We're talking about 40 years ago. So it's not like we're in recent time. So we know you're 33. So this was before you were even an inkling in your mother or father's eye, and you're the oldest child. You're the oldest child, so they didn't have any other children either. So it shows you the difference in the timing, whatever.
Right. And you know what? I know you haven't been in a while, but if you were to go to Phoenix City today, I think you would find that probably not much has really changed.
Which shows you how some things can just never change, I guess.
Right.
Which has your area where you're from in Alabama changed a lot in the 33 years that you've been around?
Yes, Montgomery, Alabama has changed quite a bit. A lot of developments. It's moving. Montgomery's so big now; it's spreading out into the surrounding counties or the surrounding areas. And a few years ago, I say a few, maybe 10, 15 years ago, the governor at the time tried to expand Montgomery County and kind of absorb some of these other smaller areas surrounding the city, but it ended up not happening. So now people are kind of moving right outside of Montgomery is developing, like Pike County, the Pike Road area. That's really developing because Montgomery's it's overcrowded. It's full. There's really not a lot of space to build in the Montgomery city limits anymore. So they're building outside of that now. But when I first moved to Montgomery, we called it Moogumry because it was a bunch of pastures and cows, and nothing. And now it's so developed. There's just it's crazy. It's just completely different than when I was a kid. So
Interesting. What's another big city in Alabama that you can think of? Because I remember when I first started on my job, I had to fly. Is there a Birmingham, Alabama?
Birmingham, I actually lived in Trussville, which is right outside of Birmingham, for 4 years when I was really little before we moved to Montgomery. Birmingham is actually bigger than Montgomery.
But Birmingham has an airport, right? It has a big airport.
Yeah, they do. Mm-hmm.
I think when I first started the job, there was no car for me because this was a job where you provided with a car as part of the job. So I had to fly from Atlanta to Birmingham, which is a really short flight, like half hour maybe. I mean, it's really fast. It's an up and down kind of thing. And it wasn't on a jet. It was on a jet, but it wasn't on a jet. Well, actually, John, you haven't flown, so you can't even relate to that either. But when you've seen movies where you see these huge planes, this was a jet, but it was, a small one, with about 100 seats maybe, or 80 seats kind of thing. And I had to pick up the car and then drive it back. And it was funny. I didn't have the car very long because then they ended up getting me a new car, which was really nice. I had a new Chevy something. I don't remember which Chevy it was, but I had a new car, which was you put a lot of mileage on because you're traveling all over. I had the state of Georgia. I had parts of South Carolina. I had the Florida Panhandle. So I was driving a lot, and I did fly some too, because if you had clients to see, sometimes flying turned out to be a smarter way to go. And it's, the best part about it, when you're on their expenses, you didn't have to pay anything. But when I was in Atlanta, then I had to pay for my own expenses, which was about half the time I was in the Atlanta metro area. I never came down to where you live, which means that there probably were not a lot of Afro-American people at the time living in Noonan. There
still really aren't a ton. But Noonan is like 40 years ago, Noonan was probably nothing but pastures and stuff too. Noonan has really developed over the last, I would say, maybe 20 years, just because Atlanta, they're not building so much in Atlanta anymore, and people are that work in Atlanta are living in Peachtree City and Noonan and Fayetteville, and they just commute to work every day because Atlanta's so big and over and heavily populated, and they're not building so much out there, so they're expanding, and a lot of people are that's why Noonan is developing so much, because of Atlanta.
I was mostly visiting your bigger cities, Macon and Columbus and Augusta and Savannah, and Chattanooga was part of my territory at the very bottom.
Wow, you really traveled a lot. That's a pretty big area to cover.
It was but again, I was always able to limit it to 2 weeks on the road and 2 weeks in Atlanta, because it's funny how even the stores that were there that I sold to are all gone. Well, Kmart is mostly gone. I don't know, maybe a few left somewhere. But Kmart was what you see in Walmart and Target now. That was all Kmart. You had Sears and J.C. Penney too, but you didn't have any of these other store chains. So Kmart was the main. It was from Kresge, which from Detroit, but that was the main chain. And Woolworth and Woolco were big. They're both out of business now. But you've seen the Woolworth stores on some of the shows you see from the 60s and 70s. The lunch counters, those were Woolworth. 5 and 10 cent stores. They all sold the cosmetics that I sold. So I was mostly in the big cities, and I liked the job. The problem was you almost have to be single, though, because you'd be away from your wife for extended periods of time. And I know that Audrey, who I'm married to now, probably would not have been happy if I was traveling all the time. So this was an earlier time when I was in my late 20s and very early 30s, because 77 to 80 was when I was doing it. But I was able to save enough money to buy the house we're in now, or at least the down payment on the house that we're in now. So that all worked out pretty well. And this is when I was drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon and some of the more macros that you're more used to.
Right.
Or the ones you have had in the past. But
Right.
I'm gonna have to head off because I have.
Yeah, well, let's go. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Ronnie, I see your comment. We're just doing a short thing here, but I'll post the link for you if you want to join off air. But thanks for joining me, Michael. I needed a beer. Appreciate you joining. Thanks to everybody in the chat for watching. And that'll do it for this one, guys. Hope to see you on the next one.
Quickly.
Yep. What's that?
Thank you for hosting tonight for this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And be on the lookout for Stout Sunday. We'll see you all there. All right.
I hope Alex, the beer master, comes on as a person presenting this week instead of hosting.
I hope so. Yeah. Alex, if you're still watching, we'd love for you to join, as everybody. Okay. So cheers. Until next time, guys. And as you can see, the beers went down very easily to this evening.
Mine too.
All right.
Take care.